Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian, joined as always by my good mate Lockie. No intro this week. Frankly, they don't deserve it. I'm not in the mood for it. I'm sure you guys aren't either. There's honestly not really a run sheet this week. Who knows what this episode will entail? Hopefully, more than anything, it'll just be a bit of a chat and it'll be a bit of therapy that we all need right now after just look, it's the worst loss I've ever seen Carlton have. So I got to ask you the question, Lockie, because a lot of people have thrown it out there. We've seen a lot in our time as Carlton supporters, but is that the worst ever loss that you've witnessed?
For sure. It, we were talking before we started, like obviously the Collingwood end of 2022, similar vibes, just with such completely different stakes and such a different build up. This is a very unique feeling to a loss for me.
Yeah, and I guess it's going to be hard to talk about this match, but I guess, Lockie, do you have a reason on why it was such a bad loss? Is it the expectation going into it that we were so confident? And like we talked about this in the build-up show, that are we being arrogant, asking the question of it's not just about the win, it's by how much coming up against Richmond. Is that the reason that this is so embarrassing a loss compared to some of the other ones we've had that we've bottled from certain positions? Is it simply we were expected to smash this Richmond team by 100 points going into it, and that wasn't even an unrealistic expectation? Is that why it was so bad for you?
Yeah, I think so. Like that performance and display, probably, against really any other Melbourne club, it wouldn't have hit so hard. We spent the whole preseason warming up to that moment. We had a massive debate, which I thought was one of the best kind of bits of content that we've done, and got a lot of good feedback on that, particularly around our chat around like the mentality and that kind of thing. So it was very front of mind as like that collapse happened. So
yeah, look, I took no pride, Lockie, that all my negatives for that blue debate that we did on our build-up show pretty much just came to fruition and were there very clear as to all the reasons you should be pessimistic about Carlton this season. I think the worst thing for me from this game was, look, I was angry, but I wasn't shocked. That isn't out of the realm of impossible for Carlton. I knew a part of me believed it could happen no matter what we said on the pod. Because, I mean, even at work that day, so many people were coming up to me asking me about the game. And I said, look, we should smash Richmond, clearly. We should be a much better team than them in the spot that they are, what we saw Richmond were last season. They've gotten worse than they were last year. They've gotten younger, more inexperienced, all these things that should say they're not going to be as good. We didn't really change too much, so we shouldn't have gotten worse. But I said at the time, look, if any team can lose it, it's us. So don't completely rule it out. But like, I'm pretty confident. Although in saying that, I still had put $20 on Richmond to win. And I think that was more, it wasn't this time some, Nostradamus, some betting, gambling extraordinaire. It was almost, look, this game is so unlosable. If we lose it, I need something that will make me slightly happy. If that result does happen, I need a win. And I was jokingly again saying, like, I've paid for a win because that $20 is just stupid. I'm clearly not going to win that bet. But hey, if a win costs me $20, I'll do it. Unfortunately, I won 200 off it, which isn't ideal. Probably the one time I've been upset that I've won some money. But the fact that I thought it was possible to the point of putting money on it, I guess kind of tells you all you need to know about just Carlton in general. Unfortunately, Lockie, we're not in that fun, optimistic point this time.
Yeah, no, the listeners, if they listen to our build up, know how confident I was. So I wouldn't have even been wasting my 20 on that.
Yeah, and look, we're going to pretty much open up this episode into answering the listener questions because I don't really know necessarily what to talk about. Awful from a podcasting point of view, but it's one of those games that I know most Carlton supporters, it's been a few days, Lockie. We're recording this Sunday night, and we still don't know what to think from that. So I asked you guys out on Twitter at Navy Blue Corner, what do you want us to discuss? What are those topics? So we will launch into that and have most of that hopefully be our discussion on this game. But I want to ask you one thing that maybe the listeners have chucked out there, Lockie. But when you're looking at this game, what's going on from now, your mood, everything. I think a lot of people will say you're overreacting. It's one game. It's a long season. It's just round one. Horrific loss, potentially the worst loss anyone's ever seen that's ever happened. 41 points up, all of that. But it's a long season, so you shouldn't overreact. But I think at the moment, we're reacting to at least 4 years. Michael Voss's era, what we've seen with this group, I think to go past that is unfair. Different coaches, different players to an extent. But is that, I guess, the caveat that you're having for this whole episode of you're not just isolating this to one game, all your feelings that you have are from 4 years of evidence?
There's definitely some prefacing that needs to happen with the discussion that we're going to have here. I think I don't believe that I will be talking in that way yet. I'm not able to fathom whether this game is an outlier or whether it is what you've just described and kind of like the accumulation of years of concerning things all in the one. So I'm not there at all. So we'll see where that bodes with this. Like I need to see, like maybe it's the Hawthorn game. Maybe it's after the Hawthorn game. If we see the exact same thing, then I'm there. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I like the discussion. I like to know where your head's at because I think so many Carlton supporters like us are going to be in so many different places looking at this. I think most will be in the negative space. There's still going to be a couple that are trying to remain positive, trying to find something, some sort of hope. Look, it is round one. Like I've heard people bring out hey, Brisbane lost a few games to start the season last year. Look what happened. There's a reason we had some belief in us playing finals this season. And should one game completely change that? Who knows? A game like this, potentially. If I'm putting the positive hat on for a second, you look at the results just over this weekend, there are a few teams that you expected to be okay this year, potentially be a top 4 team that had a horrific loss. I'm talking sort of, I guess, Freo in particular, that you thought, okay, they were meant to improve. They looked so much worse. Now, I know they played a really good team, Geelong, away from home, so they have some sort of excuses there compared to us, but it's a long season. I don't think their fans are looking at that one game and thinking it's all over. And they've had similar, I guess, pressures to us of kind of got this list. It should be getting better. What's going on with that? But it's just, it's tough, Lockie. And I think, you go.
Yeah, I guess what you've said there has kind of helped maybe frame where my head's at with this, which is that if a friend that went for Carlton came to me now and was like, what do you think I should do? Should I think about all the different ways that the match went wrong, the possible solutions, how that ties in with the last 4 years? Or should I just not think about this until the next game? I would suggest the latter. And we have a podcast, and by the questions that have come in, we know that some people are falling into that first bucket. So I want us to do our role of helping facilitate that. But that kind of is where you and I are in different camps on this, I think. Because you rightly said there's been a few outlier results this weekend. Like, I hate to say this, you're going to disconnect the podcast when I say this, but I'm not going to be surprised if we win on Thursday. And that that goes to show how different, we're potentially in here.
Yeah, look, it sounds ridiculous to say, but like that's footy. Anything can happen from here
It
on
is.
out. The evidence
Exactly.
does not show you that that's going to happen. And I think where we differ
I
right
agree.
now, you're definitely. I don't want to think about this game. I've moved on. Let's show me something else, and then I'll maybe start to have some more opinions. I want that
Yep.
proper evidence right now because seasons change so much. What was last season is in the past. Unfortunately, my brain is
Agree.
just holding on to everything, trying to create these patterns. And so I'm stuck on replaying everything that happened Thursday night. It's stuck in my head far too much. One question I'll ask before we go into listener questions, because I'm going to try and wrangle as many answers as I can out of you while I feel like I've got you in this space.
It's a good
I have
strategy.
written down 4 names of players that I think are allowed to hold their heads up high after
Oh,
that
wow.
performance. And
Okay.
it's almost 3. But I've written down 4 names. From that worst loss I've ever seen, Lockie, are there any players to get one positive in before we unleash into guys that you believe when it was all going wrong, at least there was something with those boys. We saw some fight. Or do you have more than 4 or less?
Yeah, I've got 18. No, well, the navy blue corner blue bag of badge of honor is all that I'd prepared for this. So yes, I did have a little think about that. I'd put TDK into that bucket.
He's not in my 4. He's
Interesting.
close, but he wasn't. Go.
Well, so he was my 3 votes for best on. I gave Lucas 2. I thought he on debut showed more than I was expecting.
And the 1 vote, Lockie.
Jack Silvani.
Yeah, that's fair. We're going to do the votes now. Here we go. Let's do them early in the episode. I like this. I'm going to ask, I'll give my votes and then you can veto this if you disagree. But I'd struggled with my vote. I'll start with my 2 votes. The guy who went above and beyond what I expected. I gave that to Jack Silvani because what his defensive efforts down back when everything was fading, I thought he was one of the only that was staying composed, showing me that he wanted to fight out there, goes forward, shows me he still wants to fight. I thought the whole game, that was amazing. A guy who throughout this preseason, I've said, is he going to be on our list at the end of the season? Because going off basically the fact he was a forward, that doesn't seem to have worked. The coaches have moved him into defense. If that doesn't work, because we have no evidence that it will, he could be gone. He has showed me now that it doesn't matter where we play him, in the ruck, down forward, key forward, small forward, key defender, small defender, he'll get it done. And I love everything. So I gave him the 2. My best on ground, I gave to Jack Silvani as well for the 3 votes. For every single same reason. I just thought he was the one guy that wanted to show he was there to fight. And I gave my 1 vote also to Jack Silvani. I gave every single one of my votes to Sauce. If you don't like that, Lockie, feel free to veto it and I'll give some legitimate votes. But I was so filthy on everyone's game for at least a reason. And he was the only player that I had no reason to be filthy at their game. The other guys, I guess, that were round out my 4 that I thought can at least hold their heads up high a little bit. Jacob Wiedering for his intercepts and what he was doing down back. The reason I can't give him a vote is got sent down to the goal square, and for whatever reason, he couldn't get past that. How the coaching, how himself couldn't find a way to push up the ground and be that player. And I think there was a few efforts in the last quarter I didn't love from him. I think Patrick Cripps was another who clearly was our best midfielder, still tried to fight and tried to be that leader with ball in hand. I think the knock is simply, mate, you're the captain. I feel like there's other elements to your game that you need to lead with. You couldn't rally the troops, so that's votes off. And then finally, it was Ollie Hollands who just tried, almost got knocked out on the wing, which imagine if that happened and then everything transpired after the fact. Just another one that was a trier for 4 quarters and never gave up, made mistakes. But when we're looking back on a game where unfortunately we're having to question the genuine efforts and composure of everyone on the list, I thought at least Ollie was good to a degree.
Yeah, I agree with those. I agree with those names. So why not TDK in that 4?
Yeah, look, he would be the stiff one. I think when I look at it in particular, I would say, looking at the ruck battle, did you beat your direct opponent? Did you you had a good performance with ball in hand, I would say, and influencing when you had the ball. But did your direct opponent potentially help let the other team win the game? Yes. I thought Nank was probably Richmond's best player. Therefore, I can't give you the votes because you didn't nullify your direct opponent. And I'd say Nankervis had a better game than De Koning. And there's just a couple things with De Koning when he does win the ball, his clearances. He has this propensity to still balloon the ball high up in the air and not get really those long penetrating kicks inside our forward 50. I think is still a bit of an issue with him. But look, he's definitely someone I saw positives with on that night compared to 90% of the list who I couldn't even find a positive. He's someone I'm being pretty stiff on here.
Fair enough. No, I that's all fair.
Yeah. Which, look, talking about stiff, Lockie, I have to mention this because Richmond had one of their players, their star recruit, a marquee draftee, if you will, got his willy out on the MCG, Lockie, in front of 80,000 attendees, millions watching at home. Sam Lawler kicks a goal, celebrates, gets his Johnson out, and still, Lockie, millions saw that. That still wasn't the most embarrassing thing that happened Thursday night. And that should tell you everything about our performance on Thursday night. Like that should be the biggest story out of it. Instead, it's just how bad we were. That's how confident they were, mate. Their celebrations, fair enough. Be that arrogant.
Yeah, no, I think I had my head in my hands at both of those moments. So I unfortunately missed those couple.
Yeah, well, you're probably a good thing that you missed that. But Lockie, let's go into the listener questions. What were the topics that our listeners wanted us to do our best to answer after that abomination of a performance Thursday night to kickstart our 2025 campaign?
I hope you're ready to cook here.
I'll try.
Let's see how you go. So we'll start with James. They said need to improve team defense. How do we do that?
Oh, I think it's almost more than team defense. It's hard to answer not being a coach, not knowing the exact, if I was this mastermind, I'd be there in the coach's box, being able to tell them how to lay it all out. But I think the frustrating part from me was just the ability to fight, the ability to scrap. There were so many key contests where when we weren't first to the ball, everything just capitulated, and just our pressure in general, the tackles, ability to defend by that. Like the basics weren't there, Lockie, on Thursday night. We couldn't lay and hold on to a tackle. I don't think your defensive structures are going to be any good when you can't even do the basics of defending. And was that down to Richmond's pressure? Was that down to our lack of mentality, being scared of losing to Richmond? I don't know, but I wonder how much of our inability to defend as a team goes back from ball movement, where we're losing possession of the ball, where we're trying to move the ball. And are we putting the ball in areas and trying to move in other places where if we do concede, if there is a skill error, well, then we're really vulnerable. And that's something that I fortunately wasn't at the game Thursday night. If I am there this Thursday, I'll at least be able to see how we are setting up across the ground. And it's probably going to be a focus over these next few rounds because, look, we're Carlton supporters. Everyone listening to this is going to watch next week. We're kind of stuck with this team now, so we're going to have to watch it. But that's something I'm going to keep an eye out on. Obviously, there's issues with the team defense, but is a component of that when we do have possession of it, and where we're losing the ball. Because I thought Richmond were really smart with a lot of the time of where they were moving the football. It wasn't through the corridor a lot. They were sitting back heavy in defense and then looking to attack the easy spots, knowing that, look, if we stuff this up, kick it into the corridor and lose possession, we're gone. If you look at their heat map, it was a lot on the wings, which worked out really well for them. It was very just straight ball movement. So I just wonder for us if there's elements that we can take a look at in that way, just to not be so vulnerable, because it doesn't look good when we lose possession.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't have much more to add to that one. I think you've summarized that well.
Mm.
I think a lot of these things need to be thought about in a holistic way, and it's
Mm.
not. It's all the different components that meld
Yeah.
together to create what we saw. Which kind of goes to Dom's question here, which is asking if you could do the honor, Ian Brownie, of describing the game plan, because as
Mm.
much as they try, they can't figure it out.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. I think this might be an area I go quite heavy on them. Look,
Mhm.
Carlton at the moment, we're sort of all over the shop. And you mentioned something, like we had an interesting discussion, I think, from our debate, where I talked about this over reliance on the contested side of the game. And that's what we've kind
Mhm.
of built, not only the game plan, but I think the list around. When you look at the players that we've put together, they're
Yeah.
not speedy. They're not great with ball in hand. The skills aren't there. We're not a kick through you kind of team. We're very direct with ball movement, win the contest, move the ball quickly in that sense, and get the ball into our key forwards. And I think
Yep.
weirdly at the start of that game, we were moving the ball really well, uncontested marks, chipping it around. Things looked quite well. As soon as Richmond switched it up, played a more contested game, made it a scrap, we folded, which was incredibly embarrassing. But you've got these, I think, sorry, there's so many thoughts going on into my head around this, but I think the
Mm.
issue that I'm seeing from this one game is we're kind of an amalgamation of a few game plans of what we want to be, and I don't think any of them work for what we're doing right now. We seem to be heavy on the contested side of things with what we've built. Seems like we're trying to shift away from that, which is good, into a more transition game, but we don't have the players for that. We want to be speedy. We want to be fast in transition, but we're playing 4 key defenders, which is something I was worried about going into this season. And just because of how fast the game's played, everything is about that transition. Ground balls are key, pace. That's not what 4 key defenders does to you in the back line. I thought we saw the worst case of it on the weekend. And I think you said in the discussion, is it a bad thing if we're the only team playing a certain way? If we're focused on the contest, if we're playing these 4 key defenders and we're doing things a little differently, is that bad? Thought that was a great discussion we had,
Mm.
thinking there's a possibility it's good because some team needs to be the leaders in this. If everyone's copying the same thing, you're behind. You need to find different tweaks in it. But I think we've seen kind of 4 years of
Mm.
a similar-ish game plan, 4 years of trying it this way. For me right now, the evidence says that that's wrong. And we've rocked up to another season with a way to play, and it doesn't. It either did work for a few quarters, but then as soon as someone figured out how to stop it, we didn't have that lever to pull to change it. So, yeah, it probably doesn't answer the question of what our game plan is. I guess our game
Mm.
plan is bad, but I don't want this to just be a Voss issue, a game plan issue. I don't think we're playing the right way. I think we need to be building for a faster transition game style, but there's issues with the list and how they're built to execute. And then the players themselves, the basics, they're not executing. So good luck getting them to execute a complex game plan.
Yeah. You're right. I really did enjoy that discussion in last week's episode too. And yeah, and my point, as you rightly said, was
Mm,
basically that I don't think it's inherently bad
yeah.
to not be following the crowd. I mean, I've watched I think 7 of the 8 other games this round to try and
Mm,
help myself forget about this game. And yeah, the way that Hawthorn play, it was a very prevalent example of like it's just night and day when you
mm,
watch us. Um, yeah,
mm.
even
Particularly,
even watching
yeah.
some of the North Bulldogs game, and I was watching
Mm,
how North were moving the ball, and I was like, how are they doing it better than us?
yeah. And I think that's the biggest issue. We seem to have tried to focus on it, but we're just not doing it as good as most teams in the AFL. We haven't figured it out. And that's probably why I'm so negative right now and not even caring about what next week is bringing. Why I think that when you look at this list, we're not contenders anymore. I think we're middle of the park at best. I think that's just what we are. I have at the moment accepted that. You can call that hypocritical for things I've said in the preseason and reacting to one game, and now I've thrown the toys out of the pram. I've had enough. But I was expecting more, Lockie, and I've seen the same thing again. All the issues I had going into the season, I've seen them lay out again perfectly for as bad as it could be. And now that's where I sit with things. Very negative, which is not fun. Not a fun place to be.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how and this is how we said, we discussed this. Apologies to the listeners for how I'm speaking today. Clearly, my mind is not in the right place for podcasting. But what I was meaning to say was, I was like to you, what do you expect? If this is the real reality of us now, what's next week's podcast going to be? What's the week after going to be? What's the week after going to be? Is it just going to be talking about those things, like the no hope? So that's why I think my mindset is just the only way for me to think about this is that let's just see what happens next and hope.
See, yeah, and I think I wish I was a bit more in that headspace, and maybe I'll get there. Probably what I'm now looking for, which there might be a question for this, so apologies if I end up answering it, but probably the biggest thing I wanted to touch on in this episode is around Voss, because I know that's going to be probably a question. Should we sack him? All of that kind of thing. And
let me chuck a couple of them in. So Cam said, who replaces Voss in the caretaker role after round 5? And then a question from Debbie was, can you give one example of Voss making a winning in-game move that's been a match winner? Go ahead, give us your coach thoughts.
Yeah, well, I'll try to answer those. Who's the caretaker if it does happen in that hypothetical scenario? I hope none of them. I genuinely, and this is so stupid to say, but my thought is really, if this coaching group can't get it done, then I don't want any of them there mid-season. Now, obviously, that's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. Someone has to take over. Luke Power. I don't really care, because I think if it gets to that stage where that's the decision, then it doesn't really matter who takes over in that sense. You're just going to be playing out the season to that stage. Can I think of a in-game change that he's made that's led to a victory? I can't think of an obvious one. I can think of an obvious plan going into a game that seemingly worked. There's a couple of Chincotta tags. I think particularly the Tom Stewart one against Geelong, but I can't think of something that we did in game to arrest momentum. And I think my big issue with Voss right now, there's clearly game plan issues. There's clearly all of that. That's not where I'm sitting. I've had that discussion. I feel like that, from my point of view, is kind of boring. So I tried to look at it a bit different. And because my focus right now is on the players, on the playing list, because you can look at the coach all you want, but if we sack Voss and you bring in another coach for next season, how many coaches can we go through and expect just that one savior coach to sort it all out? Now, I can agree to the point of, if you don't think Voss is the guy, which I'm definitely leaning towards, it's probably not going to be him and the coaching group that get us to that premiership, then you bring someone else in, and obviously that would happen. But is that going to just lead to, the list is good now? The coach comes in, it fixes it. I think it can improve a lot of things if you select the right guy, brings in the right systems, gets the most out of the list, which I don't think we're getting out of. We're not getting more than the sum of our parts right now. But my thing with Voss right now, because if we get a new coach, he's got the same list. What is the issue with this list? And I think my biggest criticism of Voss and everyone in that space is simply, he's had 4 years, Lockie, to figure this out, figure out which players can go and who can't when it gets tough. You think about all the bottle moments that we've had right now. And that's why it's not reactionary for me, because I'm looking at it from this list, 4 years. We've had a lot. We've had start of Vossi's season, fallen off in the second half. We've had the Collingwood loss. We've had the Melbourne loss. We've had a whole first half of bottling it, figuring it out, bottling it in a prelim final, 5 goals up. We've then had sitting beautifully second on the ladder, bottling a second half, almost not scoring a point in the first half of a game, and we've bottled it again. Now, how in that whole period have we never gone, okay, everything is about who can deal with these high pressure moments. I've seen you simply can't do it. This is the 5th time that when it's gotten tough, you've gone into your shell. You've panicked, you've fumbled, you cannot execute. I'm shocked that it's taken this long with this many same issues, and a guy who it's his second chance at coaching, it's his last ever chance to coach in the AFL. He has not seemingly had the balls here to stand up and say, I want the players that I trust that can get this right. I'm seeing issues. Let's fix them. We've gone again with pretty much the same list here. How can you not get the whiteboard out and say, it's my coaching career on the line. This is the 12th time you've done the same thing. These are the same problems that I've had. And we're just going to back it in again. That's where I'm a bit perplexed, I guess, with Voss and co here, where we've had chances to shake things up and they're smarter than me. They know what it takes to be that player at AFL level that can win a flag. Surely you can see something in these boys now that when the pressure's there, they melt away. It's what other clubs think. It's what the conversations would have been in Richmond's change rooms and huddles. Like, let's just keep pressuring them and they'll melt. We know it. We've seen it. Here's the evidence. I just can't fathom that we haven't moved anyone on, that we've got that same list.
Like who?
Well, this is the aspect where there needs to be people that know what that is, Lockie, because it's, if you look at the 22 that were out there, these are the same guys that have been in all these high action moments and games. You're telling me high performance AFL coach knows what it takes, has seen it in locker rooms, has seen, because I'm talking behind the scenes mentality stuff as well, things in training, all of that he can't see that these boys don't have it. Do you think you can learn? I guess I'll answer that question, but if I'm phrasing it to you, do you think if the same guys, every time there's pressure, fumble, make the same mistakes, bomb the ball long out of nowhere, continually don't improve high under pressure, that you think you can teach that out of them?
I don't want to address that question. I think we need to go back because I don't understand what could be different. Like, you're saying that there's players that shouldn't be in the team. Like, I just don't really understand the contention. Like Harry Mackay, for example, is he an example of one of these guys?
Potentially. I guess what I'm trying to say is Lockie, if the same group of players have continually, when that moment is there and the pressure is on them,
what group?
This whole playing list.
So what, we're going to trade 40 players?
What I'm saying is you've got a collective players here, 42 on the list, that have been in the same situations and as a collective have melted away every time there's been pressure, which means you would have seen, if I'm not watching every single second of the game broken down 100 times, seeing everything from behind the goals footage and knowing those big key moments, what the mistakes are, what exactly they're meant to be executing. So what I was saying, from someone who is watching it, telling these players, I need you in this high pressure situation to do this. Clearly they're not doing that. So from a coaching point of view, clearly a lot of players who were out there Thursday night, have been continually making these mistakes under pressure that Vossi has clearly would have been telling them, you can't do this. This is not what you do in this moment. I'll use Mitch McGovern as an example. When the ball's on the ground inside D50 and you're under pressure, don't without looking, scuff it off the ground and kick it to the danger area. As an example, if you have seen that he, in high pressure situations, continually does what you don't ask him to do, why are you keeping him on the list? As an example, you've had 4 years and you're asking a player to do something. They're not executing. We're still asking questions about this game plan, saying it's not working. The players aren't executing it. Would you not be getting rid of players who aren't executing your game plan? Why do we go into the next season with the same list thinking they're now going to execute it if they aren't the year prior? Does that contention make sense to you? I'm not saying that means right now we have to get rid of the entire list, but I would be expecting more changes to key personnel if they're meant to be the leaders and they're the ones that continually make the same mistakes.
Oh, I understand the contention makes sense, but then therefore I don't understand what the actions would have been. Like we did remove a bunch of players. We've removed a bunch of these injury riddled players that we can never rely on. And so if you're saying that there's still a whole lot of those players, I just don't see how we could have I just don't see the connection between that theory and what could actually happen.
Well, do you right now think that the players on the list have the mental ability to, when the pressure comes, deal with it?
It's too broad. There's 40. Francis Evans is not the same player as Harry Mackay.
Yes.
I don't want to talk about the list. It's 44 players is so different. In every one of them is so different and unique. Like with the mentality thing, right? Like I have to put you like on the
do it.
Because so when we did the mentality thing, Harry was the first guy that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Should we have traded him? Do you want to trade him? Are you done with
it? Well, I don't want to sound like I'm simply wanting to trade the whole list after one single firstly, because I agree with you. It's not realistic and it's not plausible. It's a silly thing to do. And it's harsh for me, I guess, to come out and say this statement of guys should have been moved on and then not list them. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not in there. I'm not in the four walls. I don't know the true mentality of these players, but surely those inside have. And where I'm coming from is when I'm seeing the output of this be the same output, there has to be players in there that that the mentality is clear from them that you're not going to get a guy you can rely upon. Because otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here having the conversation of what is wrong with the mentality of this list. Now, if that means it is Harry Mackay, because I would drop him this week, genuinely, after that performance and send a message to him and everyone. And I hate just putting out one guy from this performance because everyone was horrific, but his body language to just simply not compete against a bloke who's played 10 games of AFL football is disgusting. We don't have Charlie Curnow. You're meant to lead in this team right now. You're meant to be that forward-line leader that we can look upon. Now, maybe some of the forward entries weren't great for you, Harry, but you need to compete. You need to be that guy. If you're not, then we need to move you on because we're not going to win a flag in 2, 3, 5 years if the mentality of these players isn't to be that winner. I guess that's where I'm trying to come from, where if you've got evidence from 4 years of we're bottling it, Lockie, surely inside the walls, they have seen that certain guys, there's something not there. Why are we persisting with it? Is that Harry? Is that Gov? Is that Sard? And I'm not saying it is because I don't know, but there has to be high level players in this playing group that simply don't have it. I think Cripps has it. I think he's shown he can go when it's tough. I think Wiedering has it. I think Charlie has it. Everyone else, honestly, you need to show me that you have that mental side of the game. We're not a mentality monsters team, and it leads from the top. So there's that's I guess where I'm coming from, that I hope makes some sense to it. You're at a point now where it's really tough, because if everyone's like this, well, how do you shift that now? I guess I was hoping it wouldn't come to that, and thinking, were there things we could have done throughout these 4 years? And looking at the Voss lens, like I mentioned, of if we're bombing the ball inside 50 and we're having these same issues of, okay, when we kick the ball outside from D50 when we're under pressure, they're not executing. You would see what happened and on Thursday night, and they would go into these sessions, and I'm sure they'd review and say, okay, when you're in this situation and you're under pressure, this is the thing you do. This is how we get out of the pressure. We don't just bomb it out without looking. We do this. We'll have a player here. This is our percentage play. This is what it is. And if player X continually doesn't execute that, which we've seen over time, so many players are not executing, I'm surprised from a coaching point of view why you would just kind of persist with everyone and think you can kind of coach it out of them, and you haven't made any moves knowing it's your coaching job on the line.
Yeah, I understand. I understand your point.
It's frustrating. Yeah. It's not fun, Lockie.
Okay, so then, well, on to this question then, because you mentioned the key defenders before. So do you think, so a question from our man, Michael, do you think we can persist with Cowan, Gov, and Haynes all in the same team?
Cowan, definitely. I think he's still really young.
Yeah, it's interesting 3 names there.
And then with the other two, Haynes and McGovern, was it? It's tough. I mean, right now I've still got Silvani as a defender, and I think it's Wiedering and Jack as the 2. Haynes had one of the worst games you'll ever see. His inability to mark the ball cleanly was horrific. Wow. McGovern playing a bit of a different role, playing small. I would definitely be dropping McGovern this week due to so many having possession of the ball, making errors that way. I was very disappointed with that, much more than I was someone dropping a simple mark. And someone who's been in this team, played a lot of footy over the last couple of seasons for us, he should be better than that. Can they all play? Can Silvani in the 4? I don't know. Looked good against GWS in a practice match. Looked horrific round 1. I had reservations about it. I don't think he can play 4 talls. I just think the way the game is moving, everything being fast ground balls, we want to be a fast-moving team from D50, and we've got a bunch of tall, slow guys there. I don't think it works.
Yeah. Have you thought much about changes for this week? Like, is that a topic you want to get into, or is it too early for that?
Oh, we can definitely jump into it.
Because I haven't.
Yeah, I've definitely struggled with it.
I haven't thought at all.
It's really hard to look at those guys, because at the moment where I'm sitting is such a negative headspace of I don't think we're making finals this year is where I'm sitting. I think at least contending, being that flag team, is not going to happen. So it's what level is that next? And we're going to find out. There's a long season to go. Anything can happen. The evidence doesn't look good off one game so far. And what we've kind of seen, the patchiness and all the issues, we haven't overcome them. We had one test to see if we've overcome some issues. We've failed it. The optimistic person will always say, you've got next week. You've got 20 plus rounds to rectify it. It could happen. But my issue right now is, who are the guys I can trust and rely upon? Or at least who am I backing in for the next 5 years that I'm going, okay, I trust you enough. And names that I've got, and some of these are because they're young, I guess if you want to persist with them, Lockie Cowan, Silvani, Wiedering, Akers, Cripps, Ollie Hollands, Harry Mackay, even though I thought he was really bad, he's at least shown enough over the other years that he's still a good footballer. Charlie Curnow. I'm throwing in Ashton Moyer as a guy that he's young, so let's just see what he has. Our forward line isn't working with Smalls. They were abysmal. I like what I've seen of him in spurts. I'd rather him play than a Francis Evans is kind of where I'm seeing it, because the upside's there with a guy like Moya. So let's see that. De Koning, Walsh, they're the guys I would have as my staple kind of team. And then I guess it's kind of what you do around that at the moment. I would be keeping Lucas in. I thought he was fine for a first gamer. They put him under a lot of pressure. I don't know about you, but with Charlie Curnow seemingly coming in and not wanting to play Haynes after that or McGovern, I'm bringing Brody Kemp into the backline and going a backline of Wiedering, Kemp, and Silvani. I don't think Kemp is a forward. I think I think that's bad. I'd be bringing Boyd in off the half back to add a little bit of ball use and a bit of dash. Sard's lucky to keep his spot. My midfield, Akers, Cripps, Lucas, Hewitt, Chera, De Koning. We don't have a lot of midfielders to bring in, even though that was a big issue. Walsh is on my bench. Forward line would be Harry Charlie, Ashton Moyer, Cottrell, Zach Williams, Motlop, unfortunately, and then Orazio and Lockie Fogarty on my bench, with Cooper Lord being my sub. So my changes would be, I believe, Boyd, Curnow, Moyer, Fantasia in for Doherty, Evans, Haynes, and McGovern. And I know a lot of people are saying, Jesse Motlop was horrific, and I agree. There was at least some almost moments from him. But what do we bring in is kind of the issue here, Lockie. I don't think they'll make the changes I've made. I think they'll stay pretty similar to the team and give it another go. But I think I really want to see Ashton Moyer in. And that's pretty much the only in I really want to see. Everything else is really grim, because for me, I look at the leaders, I look at the experienced players at a loss like that, and most of them failed. McGovern, Sard, Doherty, Walsh, Chera, Harry, just to name a few. We're meant to rely upon you. You didn't show it. And that's just the sad reality of what transpired on Thursday night.
Yeah, no. I'm glad I asked. I'm glad that you had thought about it. Yeah, very interesting. I do agree with you. I'd be extremely surprised if we saw more than a couple of changes this week.
Yeah. Where to
probably
from here,
rounds
Lockie?
out the questions, I suppose. So let's go into where to from here. You know where it is
I think
for me,
a lot of people are obviously saying, "Well, is this just the end of Voss now?" Is it? What what do you need to see? Because we've had question marks over him, we've had question marks over this for a while. What do you need to see from here on out? Because I guess expectations, perspectives, a lot have changed after one horrific loss. So what do you need to see that keeps him here for, I guess, the end of the season? I'm projecting. I'm not saying in the next few games, whole season. What do you need to see to keep him?
Well, Matt, the way I'll answer that question just right off the bat would be, I didn't like how every interview after the game, whether it was in the press conference or the different players that spoke, they all referenced it's just one game. So, it's just one game thing. I didn't like that was clearly something everyone had been told to say in the media. But it is true. And I'm not being optimistic. I don't think that this is an optimistic statement, but anything can happen from here. And where we are when we have the mid-season bye and we're having a look at our first half of the season, I'm not saying it's likely or it's going to happen or I'm being optimistic, but there is a world, our favorite saying on this bloody podcast, that we look back and go, how crazy was round one? How crazy was it that we had the worst loss of our entire lives? And look at us now. Maybe that's because we're doing great. Maybe that's because we're middle of the pack, whatever it is. So I can't even think about what that means for Voss in this season, because I just have no idea how it's going to play out from here.
Yeah. Look, the evidence of him isn't great, but sacking him now or in the next couple of weeks, like it doesn't do anything.
Oh God, no! Please, God,
Now, as soon as
I'd
you
be
do that, the
shattered.
season is done. You cannot make finals with a caretaker coach.
Please don't do that.
You can't bring
Oh.
in an external coach and expect them to, in a week's training, give them a new game plan and all of that. I think sacking him, if you're going to at some stage, it would like say all the performances are bad, all of that happens. It's late in the season, you make the change, you gear up for the next year. But I think he's got a year to turn it around because the questions are still there, and and everything that we spoke about all preseason in that debate of all the bad things that possibly could be there, all the things that the players, coaches need to overcome. The worst side of it was in that game against Richmond. So they have to figure it out, and they've got 20 rounds to do it. At the moment, it feels like 4 to really overcome this wave of negative momentum. And I think to a degree, these next couple of weeks are really crucial to them. How do you perform against Hawthorn? Now no one expects you to win, but how do you perform? Because Hawthorn's going to bring that pressure. They're going to bring the speed. How do you react to that? And then if you're 0-2, then you've got the Doggies. How do you perform against them? You've got these tests every single week. It's up to them to do it now. And I think, unfortunately, my mentality is shifted in less positive, less I'm going to allow you to live in the space of I believe you can do it, let's go. I'm in the space of you got to show me what it is now. You've got to overcome this because I've got all these problems that I'm seeing, that I'm witnessing. You got to solve them. I'll be there. I'll support you through it because I'm stuck being a Carlton supporter. It's what we're going to do. But you need to prove to me that this was an anomaly, that this was just the worst thing that ever possibly happened, all conspiring at once. At the moment, it doesn't feel like that.
No, I definitely understand that. Yeah.
Do you have
Bring it on.
anything going into this game against Hawthorn?
I'm just glad that I haven't been in Melbourne this weekend and I've been able to dodge it as best I can.
Yeah, that's probably where you've lucked out, because going into work, knowing every single person, the first thing they're going to ask you is about the footy. It was a grim day on Friday. That's for sure.
No, it was the one time that I've been happy that not a single person in my workplace gives a shit about our sport at all.
Yeah, so look, that's going to wrap this episode up. It's been a tough one to talk about. Hopefully you've been able to get some sort of therapy out of it. And we just got to watch next week and see what happens at this stage. That's the worst loss I've seen in my time supporting Carlton. I touch wood, but I don't think at all there's any scenario. And maybe this is brave, me bringing this on.
Why are you putting this out there?
Well, I currently expect us to not score and lose by 250 points against Hawthorn. So, like, what we lose by 300 is that going to be that much worse than Thursday? I don't think so, Lockie. So, there's no scenario I can see that could be worse than what happened against Richmond. So, my heart can't be broken again. I'm accepting what I've seen, and that's where I'm at. But anything can happen. So, let's see. That's going to wrap this episode up. Thank you for listening and supporting the podcast. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, leave your thoughts in the comments here on YouTube. And let's continue the therapy session. See you guys next time.